So I did some videos recently just outlining basic procedures that we've been using on the group on Sundays to make sure everyone's on the same hymn sheet, and I put a couple of those up for public viewing, mainly so you can all see how terrible I am at offset pop-up attacks. But I got a reply on one of them from a chap called Philip Chapman, who asked about whether I could go over the IFF setup in a little bit more depth, and I'd be happy to. Bear in mind I'm in the Hornet, and this is going to differ from aircraft to aircraft, and I do want to say a couple of things about IFF before we jump into it. Firstly, that the IFF systems are a bit more complex in function than the way that DCS portrays them, and I think it's important to say right off the bat that IFF, that's identification friend or foe systems, they really ought to be called identification friend or not systems, because they are designed around the basis of transponder radios and pulses being sent and pulses being replied to determine whether the target that you're interrogating has the correct kit, that it is turned on, and that the correct codes are set in it. And if any of those things are not true, then it will return a negative result. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's an enemy contact, it just means that whatever contact it is that you're interrogating does not have the correct kit, the correct codes, or the kit is not turned on. Could be that they are friendly, but they just don't have the correct kit, the correct codes, or that they haven't turned it on. So that's my little bit about IFF. Also, because of the way it's modelled, if you have the IFF on, as long as you have the IFF on in the game, the game logic will be able to differentiate between friend and foe. So setting up this kit only applies in multiplayer servers, multiplayer environments, where you have another user acting as a controlling agency, and really the only mode that applies here is mode 3. I'll talk about the modes in a second, but the only one that applies to us really in the game as it is programmed at the moment is mode 3. Let me set this autopilot up. For some reason we're off into space. I'm fairly sure that's not the altitude that I wanted. There we go. So let's have a look at the IFF page then. So at the moment I've got XP for transponder. I've got a 3 up here, which indicates that mode 3 is the mode that that I can edit, and then I have a 4-digit code. Let's talk a little bit about the modes. We've got 4 modes in DCS in the Hornet. Modes 1, 2, 3 and 4. Mode 1 is a 2-digit code. It's an old IFF system. It's very outdated now, and it doesn't get used as far as I'm aware, really. I should say as well that these are NATO systems. One of them, mode 3, is more widely used than that, but that's because it has primarily civilian applications. For fairly obvious reasons, these modes and methods are not widely distributed internationally. So mode 1 is old, doesn't get used, but it basically gives you an IFF signal that can respond with a 2-digit code, so that you can further distinguish, or so that the controlling agency, the interrogator, can further distinguish who's who. Mode 2 is again an older system, not in widespread use, but still has some function, and that typically is set on the ground and not typically set by the aircrew. In the Hornet you can set the code. It is a 4-digit code, but I'm not sure that in real life in the Hornet you'd be able to set that code. Perhaps you can. As far as my experience goes, that was always a preset code that the aircrew didn't have access to. So let's get on to the things that we can change. Mode 3. Mode 3 is a military version of a civilian system called Mode Alpha, which itself was derived from older IFF systems, right? So as airspace became more cluttered and busier, air traffic controllers needed a way to better differentiate between aircraft, and that is what the Mode Alpha system gave them. Later on they added Mode Charlie, which incorporates an altitude feed into the kit, so that your transponder, when it's replying to the interrogator can tell that interrogated system what altitude you're flying at, and that again gives the air traffic controller more information on which to base their decisions. And this is the only part of this kit that you will need to interact with other than turning it on and off, even in a multiplayer environment. I'll talk about how we'll do that in a second. Finally, I'll just talk a little bit about Mode 4 and some other modes. Mode 4 is another military mode. It again has no pilot input other than setting which key you are going to reply with, the Alpha key or the Bravo key. It's a more secure IFF mode than modes 1 and 2, and it is a contemporary system. There is another mode, 5, which is a military system, a more up-to-date system, a more secure system that allows military aircraft to encode more information, and it also has some other more advanced functions that are designed to prevent friendly fire. That's as much as I'm going to say. Mode S, which again not featured in the Hornet, but for completion Mode S is similar in principle to the Mode Charlie that I discussed a moment ago, but again for civilian use, and it encodes again more information going in there. So you've got GPS coordinates, the aircraft registration, the call sign, all sorts of information that is useful to the air traffic control system for deconflicting and managing those aircraft. So, all that said, what can we do in DCS? Well, we can turn the system on and off, and in a multiplayer environment, turning the system off it will just make you appear effectively as a neutral contact. Turn it on, you're friendly, your team are going to see you as being friendly. So we should have it turned on if we're flying in a multiplayer environment. Tactical Pascal actually has a great video on why you should have your IFF turned on. If you're flying in a multiplayer environment and one of those players is acting as a controlling agency, they may wish for you to set a particular IFF code. And when they tell you to set that code, what they're talking about is your Mode 3 Charlie code. That code is called a squawk. So if I select Mode 3, you can see here I've got Mode 3 selected on its own. That's without the Charlie, that's without the altimeter readout. DCS in the Hornet treats that as a separate code entirely. You can see I've got 4 zeros here. In reality, the Mode 3 part of Mode 3 Alpha or Mode 3 Charlie, it would be the same 4 numbers. I think they've got that maybe slightly wrong. Nevertheless, what you're being asked to do when you're being asked to squawk is to press this button until 3 Charlie appears in that window with a colon next to it to show you that that is the active mode. You can then set the code that's been given to you. So let's say we get told to squawk 6701. We check 3 Charlie and we put in here 6701. There's no 8s and 9s, it's 0 to 7 only, limitation of the kit, and press enter. We are now squawking 6701. If we go and look in Lot ATC, we can see that we are now squawking 6701 in Lot ATC. And that's the picture that the controller will see, and that enables them to give 6701 to you, 6702 to your wingman, a different code to somebody else. It enables them at a glance to see who they're talking to and to quickly identify who's who. Now in DCS and Lot ATC there's a bunch more information being fed in there. They can see your name, they can see everything about you. It's much more like a Mode S system than a Mode 3 system. But some of these hardcore servers, you know, you'll set your Lot ATC up so that the controller would only see what an actual controller would be able to see. I mean that's pretty fringe stuff. That's pretty high level. Some pretty dedicated tactical Pascal followers out there all trying to be GCIs and fighter controllers. But I'm sure it appeals to some of you. So again, hardcore sim mode on a multiplayer server. When you go over into behind enemy lines, so to speak, you don't want to be blasting out your IFF codes to all and sundry. This is going to make you very obvious. Even civilian air traffic air traffic centres are going to be able to see you if you're squawking mode 3, so you are going to turn that off as you fence in, which I showed in a previous video, and but that will make you less obvious to civilian controllers. Now, in DCS that's not modelled. You're not going to, your signature is not going to increase if you don't turn your mode 3 Charlie off. So if you're playing single player, don't worry about it. So if you're playing on a multiplayer server, those are the methods by which you're going to be asked to identify yourself electronically to those people who are controlling you. Hopefully that was useful to Philip Chapman and a few others. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we can continue to bring you some more useful videos about air warfare and about DCS in the future. Thanks very much.